Welcome to another episode of You Don't Know Jack with Lydia and Matt. How's it going, Matt?
It's going, Lydia. It's supposed to be a nice day here in Mountain, Maryland. Going to get warming up.
You might be in a t-shirt today.
Maybe.
Yet to be determined.
I'm still in a sweatshirt and sweatpants right now.
Same. It is a Sunday, which, is our classic day.
Easy like Sunday morning.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the sun is now shining. It was not shining when I got here, but the sun is out.
It's broken through the clouds.
It has. No.
Yeah, we had a nice night last night.
We did.
Yeah.
A lot happening in the greater Cumberland area.
Yeah, absolutely. There was some fundraising activities. I think there's a couple of those. And then, you and I, of course, went to go see the Almost Dead.
Dead Again. The Grateful Dead cover band that plays here locally.
Yes.
And I was, and they were great out of 1812. Shout out to 1812 for having it. It was great. I was only slightly disappointed because I knew he was coming, but I didn't realize it was the same day. Willie Walker of Old Crow Medicine Show fame was playing at a local joint in is it Davis, West Virginia?
It's in Davis. You mean Willie Watson?
Willie Watson. I'm sorry. I keep saying it wrong. Willie Watson.
Uh-huh.
Willie Watson was playing at
Purple Fiddle.
At Purple Fiddle, which I'm sure was just wild.
Oh, I'm sure it was packed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a big place.
It isn't. I think he's coming back. I think he's doing a couple of shows there, which would be fun. We're lucky. The weather's starting to break and things are happening. But yeah, last night was great.
Yeah.
It was warming up as it was raining.
Yes.
It's strange, but here we are.
We also had the Greenway Avenue Stadium. Walk run. Rain hurt us.
Yeah,
I have to say, what we didn't have is, the runners are going to come out. They're going to do their thing. It's a sanctioned race, so they're going to come out and run it.
Sure.
But you had no walkers. Yeah. I mean, nobody was coming out to walk in the rain. Runners run in the rain. Walkers do not walk in the rain.
Well, no.
Yeah, and
saturation point is much higher when you're walking.
But it was still always a good event. It's a way to just, it's not really about the money we raise during the walk. It's about just raising awareness about the stadium, showing all the good stuff we've done.
Absolutely.
Obviously the turf, the 8th lane, the track was redone, has an 8th lane. The new lights just got put up. We just got $250,000 from the legislature. Where the last final phase that we're on is press box, bathrooms on the visitor side. Bathrooms are definitely in need of an upgrade to certainly for ADA purposes, because that's where the seating really is for disabled folks, and the bathrooms are not of that appropriate quality. So that's where we're headed next.
That's great.
It's we have a great committee, great folks on it. And yesterday we did honor our late friend Mark Mangus, former guest here on With You Don't Know Jack, and Maryland football legend, Fort Hill All-American in both football and basketball. All around, just good guy, ultimate cheerleader for the stadium committee. Was the face of our committee, and we've certainly talked about Mark passing last year. But so the race was in honor, in memory of Mark yesterday. So that was. I wish we would have had a day like this.
Yeah.
Because I think people would have really come out because it was for Mark.
Sure.
But I understand the rain. I don't think it was about a lack of love for Mark. It was just about
it was a lack of love for the weather.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really what it boils down to. Well, I mean, a lot happened this week. NFL draft.
Yeah.
I think you and I talked about it. Everything happened. I mean, it was like the Caitlin Clark of drafts. Everybody kind of knew what was going to happen. And every team, I think, did pretty well.
Yeah, I think the sort of the takeaways
really
of the draft. I think the biggest thing that I thought was, man, it was such a great win for Detroit. Detroit was the host. I think they said over the 3 days, like 750,000 people came to the draft.
Well, I mean, I think it's a juggernaut for any city to host a draft, and because people are going to travel there, they're going to be able to, their hotels, the restaurants, everything benefits from it. And I think that it's a big economic driver.
There's no doubt. Baltimore definitely is interested in it. They're doing major upgrades to the stadium, which is already a nice stadium, but part of that, the 2 stadium complex, and the money that the state of Maryland's investing for Camden Yards and for M&T Bank Stadium, they definitely are interested in potentially pursuing this. It'd be a great shot in the arm for Baltimore. Yeah, much like Detroit, can certainly benefit from those kind of things.
Of course.
But no, it was a really great weekend for Detroit. So I like that. And then I guess the biggest takeaway was, 6 quarterbacks in the first 12 picks.
Yeah, that's
it's
high.
wild.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Bears think they got their guy in Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
The Commanders got Heisman Trophy winner Jaylon Daniels. Your boys, the Patriots, got Drake May from North Carolina. And then, the big surprise was at number 8, where the Atlanta Falcons, who just signed Kirk Cousins to a big contract, went ahead and drafted Michael Penix Jr. from Washington, who was the runner-up for the Heisman.
Yeah.
So I think that was kind of the surprise of the draft for sure.
I think it's good planning on Atlanta's part, only because you have a quarterback that is coming off of a catastrophic injury. Yeah. And yes, you hope that he's healed and ready to go, but that doesn't necessarily mean that his other Achilles won't pop, because that
happens because because you're putting that different pressure on it, protecting the one that
statistically
the one that's fixed is probably the one that's stronger.
Super strong, yeah. Well, that's the thing.
But they tend to favor it. It's like when you get a knee replaced.
Exactly right.
Your replaced knee is the better knee, but but people tend to favor that.
Right, and so it's like your statistics go up incrementally if you have a repair to your Achilles that your other one will rupture. So I think it was a good decision for them to draft, because you have Cousins. Yes, you signed him to another big deal, and that's great. But at the end of the day, if he gets hurt, you don't really have anybody. So I think it's a good insurance policy for sure.
And it's where Atlanta's been the last couple of years since Matt Ryan.
Yeah.
It was sort of done. He ended up going to the Colts for a year, but he was essentially done.
Yeah.
And they kind of feel like they've been in a quarterback wasteland for a couple of years, and they think they have a lot of talent, which they do on offense, and they're a quarterback away. And their rationale was, hey, we might not get to pick. We want to win now. We might not be in a position to pick a quarterback in 2 or 3 years without really mortgaging our future.
Right.
And they didn't have to do that here, and they, took a very good quarterback.
I think again, it's smart. It's smart. It's really good. Another team that makes really good decisions year after year is the Eagles. I mean, they drafted really well this year.
Eagles moved up to get one defensive back.
Yeah.
And then in the second round, surprisingly, one fell to them that a lot of people thought would be a first-round pick.
Yeah. He went kind of late in the draft too, like 22 or something. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I just think that the Eagles they have really good leadership, and their GM, and they're saying like, okay, these are the players. We're watching these players, and the thing is, in the draft, they're not just drafting them because they've had a good 1 year.
Right.
They're watching these players for 3 or 4 years
Absolutely.
to see how they develop, and they're really keeping track. So, it's like the farm system for baseball. Yeah. College football is the farm system for the NFL, and we've talked about that before. And it's so you've got these teams are invested in these players from, probably their sophomore year on, depending on how good they are. But no, it's incredible that they're like saying, we've been watching you for 3 years. We've had all these coaches call and say, this is the perfect guy for you on this team at this time. And it's just really nice to see that, and they're supportive as well.
And there's just certain organizations that year in, year out just kind of win the draft. I mean, nobody personifies that probably more than the Ravens, And by the way, the Ravens are very fond of saying they like to draft guys that are Ravens.
Yes.
Like they look for a certain mindset. Yeah. They want a certain personality trait.
I mean, that was much like a Raider. And, you know what I mean? Like you're going to, the old Raiders. Right. Not the new ones in the Vegas. But, you had that mentality of like tough. Right. You're not going
to. Might be a little color outside the lines under the law, I mean, Matuzak, right? He was a lunatic. People said, guys that played with him said when Matuzak came into a bar, they would climb out windows because they knew he's going to get it, but he's an animal. Okay, he was really tough.
Yeah.
No, they like those certain kind of players, and I think the Ravens sort of have that mindset is like, we want our kind of guys.
Well, and that's the thing. If you have a team of players that are all connecting and all, moving in the same direction and get along because they have the same mentality and they have the same drive, how is that a bad thing for a team?
Yeah. No, and I think the Ravens are the kind of team that, when I watch what they draft, they draft really well. Yeah. They don't, the Ravens are really loyal to their draft board. Yeah. They're like, man, we take the best available talent. Yeah, they're trying to fill holes. Yeah. But they're like, man, if this guy's
available and we can use him.
They got a guy at cornerback, and he's from Clemson. They got him at 30 that they thought was a top 20 talent. Yeah, they could use help with the cornerback. It probably wasn't their biggest need. Their biggest need was probably offensive line, which they addressed in the second round.
Yeah.
No, but they're like, no, we stay loyal to our board and we just get premium talent.
Well, yeah.
And a perfect example of that is the guy they drafted a couple years ago, Kyle Hamilton, who's, took the NFL by storm. Yeah, most people think the guy's going to win a defensive player of the year. They didn't need him, but he fell to him. And they're like, well, we just can't, they were drafting like 14th at that point. And they're like, well, yeah, we don't need that position, but we're going to take it. Top 5 talent. Yeah. And he fell to us at 14. We take him. They did the same thing like with Terrell Suggs. That certainly worked out well for them.
Absolutely.
But that's just sort of how they draft, and it works for them. And they're teams that win drafts year in year out.
It's impressive. It's really nice to see. And then, the Commanders did pretty well.
They did.
I'm interested to see how the Commanders do this year, only because they have new leadership as far as starting at the top.
Right.
I would say it's a banner year for the DMV as far as the O's have new management, the Commanders. Right. The problematic ownership has sort of shifted out of the area. And
with the exception of Ted Leonsis. Now, he was like just a minor kind of factor.
Yeah.
And now he is certainly he's like public enemy number 1. But now it sounds like that he is looking to stay in D.C. There was a lot of kind of the Virginia thing kind of went up in smoke. He was going to move to Alexandria.
Yeah.
Was going to move the Mystics, the Capitals, and the Wizards.
Yeah.
And going to abandon sort of Chinatown, which was all built around that arena.
Yes.
So it was going to be a real problem, and I think that's sort of gone away.
Yeah, because people were like, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard, and there's
and Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia, couldn't get it done.
Right. Thank goodness.
And so. But no, I think it's absolutely a rebirth in ownership.
Yeah.
Again, I think the Commanders, as you said, ushered in new head coach.
Yeah.
New starting quarterback. So no, I think there's I think there's reason for some optimism. I don't think the Commanders will be very good.
No, but I mean,
it's trending the right way.
I think it's a building year, but I also think that if you have leadership that understands that and is able to communicate that to their fan base and also says, we hear you and we're working towards that. And there's a plan to work towards having a successful football team and a franchise. You can't be mad at that. And I think that most Redskins and Washington football team and now the Commanders fans will say is like, yeah, we've been in this for the long run, the Dan Snyder era, and we understand how terrible it can be, and we're optimistic. I think there's a
sense of optimism with Commander fans for the first time.
Yeah.
And I think also, I think Ron Rivera was a lame duck.
Totally.
I don't think it was really Ron Rivera's fault. He just, but he was a lame duck, so you have a new coach. Now, I mean, look, if you're the owner, you have one priority. Got to build a new stadium.
Yeah.
And so you've got to be
apart.
So you got to be working with but I tell you what I don't think Maryland's governor, obviously Wes Moore, Bowser, the mayor of D.C., and Glenn Youngkin in Virginia, they're not going to be played against one another.
No.
I think. Look,
it's a collaborative effort for sure.
But I think though ultimately the Commanders have to say, hey, we want to be in D.C. Or we want to stay in Maryland, and they have to commit to it, and then go get the best deal you can. You know, but I don't think you're not gonna. And Snyder was trying to play one against the other, and it just hurts your credibility.
And also they don't have time for that. You know what I mean? They just don't have time for it. So I think that it'll be interesting to watch, but I'm excited to see how they rebuild a literal stadium and a team.
Yeah.
So they've got their work cut out for them.
The owner's job is not to play, is not to call plays. Your owner's job really isn't even to hire a coach. That's your GM's job. They're supposed, the GM and the coach are building players, building teams.
Yeah.
The owner's job is, quite frankly, if you're Commanders, is to get a new stadium.
Yeah.
That's your job.
Absolutely.
Josh Harris, that's your job. And that's where you also benefit, though. Josh Harris walks into a room. I understand he's a billionaire or whatever he is. Okay, I don't know. If I'm Governor Wes Moore or Youngkin or Bowser, that doesn't necessarily move the needle.
No.
Magic Johnson walks in, man, he moves the needle.
Yeah, man.
And that's Irvin Magic Johnson.
I mean, if Irvin Magic Johnson walked into, I don't know, Podcast Hill.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I don't know if we could fit him in.
I don't know.
Man.
I was just looking at the doorway. I was
dude,
like, man, oh man.
I mean, Irvin Johnson's 6'8", 6'9". He's a big guy.
Yeah.
But no, Magic moves the needle, and that's why he's on the ownership group.
Exactly.
Is because of his gravitas. Not just his business acumen's been fantastic, but he brings that star power.
He brings that nice little stardust to the deals.
And that he's just...
And everybody feels like they're winning because they get to meet Magic Johnson.
Yes.
They, it's like one of those, it's like a warm, fuzzy feeling when you walk into the room. And I've never met the man, but I'm sure that is exactly...
Like,
I'm sure you just sit there and just be like, oh my God. It's Magic
Johnson. Like you just think like, the room is a brighter place when Irvin Johnson walks in. Yeah, it's like, wow.
You're just going to look up at this man, this giant of a human.
Dude, when your nickname is frickin' Magic, you're
going to bring magic to the deals,
exactly.
Right?
So, I think that's where the Commanders are. Hey, your Patriots doing a rebuild as well.
Well, yeah, they
gone from essentially the oldest head coach to the youngest, Gerard Mayo, young guy, kind of turning over that roster.
I think it was again a rebuilding of a legacy organization. Like I said, I can't be upset about it. We had, in my lifetime, a New England sports fan went from very much a tragic situation with the Red Sox to a very positive one. And the same thing for the Pats. Everybody hated the Pats because they kept winning.
Right.
And it's like, look, I've experienced the highs, and you're going to have the lows.
No,
and also, again, when you
have a franchise that's won 6 Super Bowls, it's kind of hard to complain for a while.
I'm not.
No, and I know you're not. No, I'm saying, but for any Pats fan, it's going to be hard to complain. People aren't going to feel bad for you.
No, and that's the thing. It's like, I think a lot of people who got season tickets were like, look, you buy tickets to games and you hope the team's going to be good. Yeah. And in the past 10, 15 years, you knew the team was going to be good. And now it's sort of, we're in the slump. So it's fine. But again, it's a rebuild, and I'm interested to see how Robert Kraft does as far as moving the needle again in the right direction.
With all due respect, I'm not really sold on Bob Kraft. Bob Kraft got it right when he hired Bill Belichick.
I agree.
Bill Belichick got it right when he drafted Tom Brady.
Listen, I'm not saying that there weren't a lot of factors.
Yeah, I'm just
and
saying,
luck in that.
I think Bob Kraft might be drinking his own Kool-Aid a bit much. I don't know that he's a transformational owner that he thinks he is.
But he funds it.
He does, and he has overseen one of the great runs in professional sports. I'm not taking that away from him. What I would say is he didn't screw it up.
No,
okay, but do I think Bob Kraft's going to be like, man, this guy who just understands it is going to hire?
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I'm interested to see how he handles this specific guidance. So he's the owner. Right. He's hired the people to do the guidance.
Absolutely.
And he, if anything, you take away from him, he hires the right people. He finds the right people to do the job.
Right.
I'm interested to see how he sort of navigates through this because he's had such a great, successful spot about it. And now he's sort of like, he's older. Now, let's face it. Right. He's an older guy. He's had the highs. Right. Now let's see if his wisdom and experience can help navigate the team through this kind of new uncharted territory.
Right. When I think of great owners in sports, it's really hard to think of one. Who do you really like?
Yeah.
Now, I think the Mara family, the Giants, have always been really kind of classy. Kind of a classy organization about how they
the Steelers
from the ownership, the Rooney family. Yeah. No, but there's not many. Owners that really jump out like, oh wow. Look. The Hallis family's owned the Bears forever, but the Bears aren't very good. No. They've been bad for 40 years, so it's not like they're some dynamo.
Right.
It's kind of interesting to see. I actually think the Ravens, yes, I'm biased. I think the Ravens owner does a great job because Steve Bisciotti he isn't one of those guys that needs the credit.
He's not out there.
No, he doesn't need the, Steve Bisciotti. It's interesting. You never see him on TV. They never flash the camera to him in the luxury box.
No.
Who do we see? We always see Jerry Jones. We always see Dan Snyder.
Robert Kraft.
We never see the Rooney family. They're not shooting into the boxes there.
Yeah, the Kansas City Chief family also, they show a lot. Honestly, I feel like, you don't know that guy. And and that's good. You shouldn't.
But, they don't show Jeff Lurie, right, who runs the Eagles very often.
No.
He runs a really good franchise, right? Jeff Lurie's been a very good owner for a couple decades.
And I think that it's one of the things that struck me about the draft when the Eagles would call a player, they would talk to the GM first, then the coach, and then the owner.
Right.
And I don't know if that's standard practice, but it was very warm because the entire front office essentially was like, they knew this player. They were so excited. Yeah. They were rattling off these different facts and like, it's going to be great. We can't wait to have you here, blah, 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 blah. And they just knew these players versus just like, well, you're going here.
Yeah.
See you later. It was sort of like a very like wholesome and warm and welcoming approach, which I thought was interesting.
Oh, so it's so obviously it's really hard to measure if you'd had a good draft or not for a couple of years.
Of course. But it seemed there was no surprises.
No, other than Michael Penix, and I do understand what Atlanta was thinking. No, I think the draft was kind of blah, but not in a bad way. I mean, they're not supposed to be like exciting. They're supposed to be filling needs, getting talent. It's very exciting for all those guys that get their first chance. I mean, they got they all got hired yesterday.
Yeah.
The last 3 days we've had 300 guys hired. That's what
amazing.
happened. 300 people got jobs.
Yeah. And I think it's great.
Yeah.
And it's what they've been working towards. Yeah,
absolutely. They've been working for their coaches, in the college, high school, youth league, their families. Yeah. So it's
a win for everybody.
It's an exciting day. A couple guys from Maryland got drafted, so that's always it's
big
very
deal.
exciting. Yeah, Locke's very excited about that.
Absolutely, as he should be.
Yeah. So here we go.
Well, let's talk about the 75th annual Dapper Dan.
Tonight, Dapper Dan Awards dinner here in Cumberland, named after Dick Stern, who was the Dapper Dan dinner for so long. Dick just passed away in the last year or so, but we're we're going on as Dick would expect. And no, it's a very exciting day, and you know what we're doing at the Dapper Dan dinner tonight is we're celebrating the year of women's basketball.
Thank goodness for that.
Yeah.
We've got Abby Beeman and Katilyn Fratz.
Abby Beeman from Frankfurt was just recently at Marshall, played in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
She's the top award winner. Finally,
she played for the new coach at Tennessee.
Yeah, finally dethroned Ty. Ty had won it 4 straight years, understandably. Because remember, the top award winners it was Ty, and then Daniel Deal has won it multiple times recently. And what it's about is who brings the most national recognition to your area, to the area of the community. And I think clearly Abby Beeman did that this year. Not taking anything away from Daniel Deal, who's down at NC State doing a great job.
Yep.
Ty has obviously got a new contract in Buffalo.
Yep.
Also doing a great job. But yeah, this is and Abby was not recognized, as I understand it, simply because it is the year of women's basketball.
Yeah.
It's Cumberland's just where it is. It's consistent with what we've seen.
It's
Women's
trend.
college basketball has really come into the consciousness this year. And not that it hasn't been, but really jumped out this year.
I would say the end of last year.
Took that bump up.
Yep, absolutely.
And Abby Beeman is the top award winner. And then Katilyn Fratz is an assistant coach at the University of Maryland, which is obviously a very good women's basketball program.
Yeah, she went to Northern Garrett.
Yep. So she will be the kind of the keynote speaker.
Awesome.
So it's very exciting. And
you have to present 3 awards this year.
I am. So I historically have. It'll be I was counting this up. So 1, 2, 3. This is the 8th year that I will give the Lineman of the Year award. I've given it to 9 guys because we split it 1 year. So this will be the 9th person that's going to win the Lineman of the Year award. I give in honor of my dad,
Jack.
Yep. And this year it's Will Bannon from Mountain Ridge. The interesting thing is, so last year it was Peyton Miller from Mountain Ridge who went onto UMass where he's playing.
Yeah.
And I talked to Coach Patterson, recently retired Ryan Patterson from coaching. And Coach Patterson and I were talking, and I said, what strikes me is I'm literally giving it to somebody who is half the size of the kid I gave it to last year. Will Bannon is 6'2", 160 pounds, scrappy guy, very good defensive end, played on the offensive line at that size, he's a tall guy, but not very big. But and I said to Ryan when I was talking to him, I said what keeps ringing through my head was the Eisenhower quote, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in a dog.
Right.
And he said he thinks that's absolutely correct. And then what it had me thinking is, despite the massive humanity size difference, I've been thinking every kid that every guy, a young man that I've given the award to, they all sort of have those kind of very similar characteristics for the 9 guys that've got it. Man, they're tough. They're gritty.
Yeah.
I mean, every year it's like I hear the same things from different coaches about different kids. They're like, yeah, man, he got it because he's just gritty. He's tough.
He wanted it. Yeah.
He's
He goes after it.
He's not scared to do the dirty work, that we need you to do. And so, no, I think Will is a very logical choice. So I'm excited to meet Will and to give him this award this year.
Awesome. And you're also doing Defensive Player of the Year?
Yep. Jaylon Atkinson from Fort Hill came out of nowhere. It really did. And that's what Coach Alcar and I were talking about it yesterday and said, Matt, if you would have said, this kid's going to be the Defensive Player of the Year. He said he barely played as a junior.
Yeah.
But what they told them for the Fort Hill kids after the state championship that they won as juniors, so in 22, he said, man, we're losing 20 starters. There are positions available
if you want them.
If you want them and you want to work for them.
Yeah.
And he said, this kid
work for it. Good.
And he said, it was just, he said he always had the high football IQ, the work ethic, but he just got better. His skill got better. And because of those things. And so excited to meet Jaylon, and then I'm also giving the Player of the Year award this year. And we mentioned it. Mark Mangus had given these awards recently, and so I was asked to pitch in and fill in when Mark was ill last year. And my friends at the Dapper Dan, Adam Stern, and those guys asked me if I would certainly give it, and I'm a very pale comparison to Mark Mangus, but I'm doing it. And Mark would be so excited for Carter Hess to win it. To preview what I'm going to talk about, I said, rarely are my predictions correct. But 2 years ago at the Dapper Dan, when I gave Carter Hess the Lineman of the Year as a sophomore, I said, I'm giving it to him for the first time. But this will not be the last time I give him this award, unless he wins one of the other awards. And so last year he was the Defensive Player of the Year. So this year he is the Player of the Year. Zach and I were talking, Zach Alcar and I were talking, and I said, Zach, for my money, he is by far the most decorated lineman in the history of this area in terms of accolades awards. We've had guys win Defensive Players of the Year award. We had a guy from Moorfield about 10, 15 years ago who did get Player of the Year, went on to play at WVU, was an offensive lineman. But it's very rare to see an offensive lineman win 3 of the major awards. And Carter's won 3 different ones. We've had guys win 3 of the major awards. I think Ty Johnson won 3, sophomore, junior, senior. I think it was maybe like Offensive Player of the Year and then Player of the Year, Player of the Year. We've seen that happen, but never have we seen a kid win 3 different awards, a young man. And Carter has done that. I think Zach and I were talking, I think combined between wrestling, track, and basketball and football, he's won 7 state championships, either as a team or an individual.
Wow.
Be it shot put or discus, and then wrestling, and then obviously football. So very excited to honor Carter. Carter's not going to be there, unfortunately, because he's out practicing for the Big 33, which is a really big honor. Because they only take 33 kids from the entire state. And they play against the best 33 players.
That just shows how dedicated he is.
So and it's so I'm really excited. And the Dapper Dan does such a great job of honoring the young folks in our community. I'll leave. Before we change to the next subject, I was in an awards dinner that the Cumberland Optimists put on. And my daughter they picked 2 kids from each school. My daughter was one of them. And I was sitting with Jeff Blank, who's the superintendent of schools in Allegheny County. Jeff got up to say a few words and said, about people saying, oh, yeah, the kids this day, they're not the same as they used to be. And Jeff said, no, I totally agree with you. They're better. These kids and all 3 of the guys that are getting awards in football, all the people that are being honored in the other sports, these young folks, these young men and women are in so many activities, sports, their
academics,
time, academic. I mean, I watch my daughter, I'm tired of her when I think of her schedule. And much like, so many of these folks. So I totally agree with the superintendent that, it's different. They're better. They work harder.
They do. I mean, so it's different. They've got different distractions and everything else. And the fact that they're this dedicated is pretty incredible. So, but the Dapper Dan, it starts, it's going to be, this is Sunday. It starts Sunday at 4:00. So I'm excited about that. Awesome.
My next step is go to the office and I have to write what I'm going to say about these 3 guys.
That was going to be my next question. How far along are you in your speeches?
Well, I mean, you just gonna have to wind me up and give me the microphone, and I'm probably pretty well good to go. But I'll
really,
make sure,
I had no idea.
I'll make sure I write down some statistics. But I'm clearly ready to talk about these guys. As
of course you are. Yeah, absolutely. All right, we're gonna do a big shift. We're gonna talk about something on the national level, which is Mike Johnson actually did his job, which is the Speaker of the House of Representatives of the United States Congress. And he put on the floor for a vote aid to Ukraine.
Right. Aid to Ukraine, aid to Israel, and with humanitarian to Gaza, and also aid to Taiwan. And
a TikTok ban.
And a TikTok ban.
Yeah.
But
let's just throw that on at the end.
Which,
they tacked on a TikTok ban.
I'm lost on TikTok. I don't understand it. And I understand what it is. It isn't. I don't understand. I'm not sure that the Chinese or the Chi-Coms are infiltrating us via TikTok, but okay.
Listen, all I can say is, from a person who does marketing,
right.
I did not jump on the TikTok bandwagon only because I felt like this is, they tell you, like, Apple gives you when you download an application, they say like what data is going to be used and what they track and everything. They track everything.
Right.
And I was like, so normally it doesn't matter who owns you. Right. I'm not into that. Right. So I'm very limited on, very cautious of that. I understand I have to do some of that for my work. So it's just like goes with the territory. However, I can choose not to use and they had a warning on this. They're like, this is a Chinese owned company. The federal government doesn't allow people to use TikTok on
federal devices.
Devices. So it's sort of like, this has been a thing that's been known. Yeah. I think that, ByteDance, who is the owner of this particular owner of TikTok.
Now, he is not Chinese, right? He's from
Singapore.
Singapore, yeah.
But the company is owned by a Chinese company.
Right.
Which is fine, and Singapore is known for their tech.
Right.
And they've always been known for their tech, and that's great. I love Singapore. It's a fantastic country. I highly recommend you. Don't chew gum when you're there.
Bad form?
No, they'll arrest you.
For chewing gum?
Yeah. They're very strict with their rules.
What's the issue with gum?
Chewing gum, littering.
Because like people litter when they chew gum, so they just said we're going to ban chewing gum.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean,
right on.
You have to be a decent human when when you're in Singapore. But I just think
it's no place for Nate Price.
Yeah.
Shout out to Nathan Price. Yeah.
Oh, he's gonna love that. Yeah. But honestly, I feel like we had Congress asking the guy from Singapore all these questions, like, are you involved in all that stuff? He's like, no, I'm from Singapore, which is embarrassing for us as a country because that guy clearly didn't know what Singapore was and or was aware of geography in general. So I think the TikTok ban it was inevitable because it's a older person's push for control and also like maybe the first step in regulating social media, which I think definitely needs to start to happen. But the more appropriate way is to say, okay, Mike Johnson did the right thing.
No, he did, and look, he's being threatened with a motion to vacate the chair, i.e., the same way Kevin McCarthy was ousted.
Yeah,
and Mike Johnson put the right thing to do above keeping his job, and there's probably very few people politically that I have more disagreements with their worldview than Mike Johnson, but he did the right thing. We voted to aid Ukraine because they're going to lose the war if we don't.
Yeah.
And it is in our strategic advantage.
100%.
Like, I don't understand why people don't understand this. Do you understand it's the first ground war in Europe in 77 years?
Yeah.
We can't let people do this.
No.
And especially, yes, are we biased towards Europe? Well, okay, fine. But, in
NATO,
in Europe, depends on your worldview, the civilized world, okay, for the 20th century was all, and even most of the 21st, other than obviously with the rising, Chinese tiger, has been dominated by Europe and North America. And what we knew after World War II is, no, we're not going to do this anymore.
Right.
We're not having ground wars where you're taking territory from other countries.
No. Right.
It's
very like USSR situation.
Well,
I mean, that's what he wants. Right. But I think that, and also not just that, but the fact that Ukraine is a huge grain supplier and in a global economy that we all live in, you can't look at a country that is, and the Ukrainian people are a very resilient and proud people, and they're just living in a war zone and continuing to push. And my thoughts are, what are we doing here? This is crazy. And the fact that you've had 2 European countries join NATO in the last 2 years is a huge thing.
Absolutely.
Sweden and Finland.
Right.
And, you've got these 2 Nordic countries that were pretty independent, but have realized that there's a huge possibility for a ground war in their countries. and they want the support.
And no one has a larger border with Russia than Finland.
Right.
And one of the reasons, though, Finland hadn't joined is, again, they were independent, but they also weren't looking to provoke the Russian state for any number of years.
Mm-hmm.
And because they would be a logical jumping off point.
Correct.
And they know that.
Yeah.
But then they realized, it's better to be on the NATO team. And,
well, it's a better team.
Yeah.
I mean, it's you either stand alone or you end up in a situation like Ukraine,
right,
where Ukraine should be a part of NATO,
right,
and had applied to be a part of NATO because they could see this coming down, and it wasn't approved. So I feel like now the problem now is that Ukraine is stuck between a rock and a hard place. It should be a part of NATO, but NATO doesn't want to have to provide ground troops and enter into a full-on war.
Because we would be at war, right?
We would be at war.
Article 5, you attack one NATO country, you attack them all.
Yeah, so that's why they're kind of in this like weird, sticky situation. If they do, I get a chance to kind of like push back and get their land and basically hold a border, then they become part of NATO. And then I think the only thing else is to retreat on Putin's back.
And I think that will be the sanction that comes to Russia when this is all said and done, is that Ukraine will be admitted to NATO.
Yeah.
I think that will be the ultimate punitive act.
Correct.
That Russia will pay for.
Yes.
Whenever this comes to an end, wherever Ukraine's border ends up, when this is all said and done, when there's an armistice.
Yeah.
Because that's essentially, no one's going to win outright. There's eventually, it's going to be a ceasefire, an armistice. Someone essentially, quote unquote, sues for peace.
Yep.
That's where it comes. And I think the sanction for Russia that Europe will tax them with will be Ukraine's admission to NATO.
Yep.
Saying, we're not doing this again. We're not.
And the thing is, Belarus should just be part of Russia at this point.
They want to be, so fine.
So maybe that is the same. Maybe that is it. You get Belarus. You leave Ukraine out of it.
Yeah, they want to be part of Russia, and they align, but they have a dictator in Belarus, and so, But actually, what we've always been worried about are Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, the former Soviet satellite states, Soviet satellite republics, that are members of NATO.
Yes.
So
so that's the thing. It's sort of like we just have to get to a point where we can get everybody that borders Russia into NATO, and then maybe that'll contain them. Right.
Hopefully. At least on the European side.
On the European side, yeah.
So, so good for Mike Johnson. And then obviously the one along with it, as we talked about, and certainly we could talk about it forever and we'll never answer the question.
Correct.
Obviously, Israel did receive aid. There's also humanitarian aid for Gaza. We've seen a lot of protesting this week on college campuses about the Israeli war in Gaza against Hamas. I don't think any American leader, and quite frankly, I don't think any rational thinking American doesn't think that Israel shouldn't be prosecuting a war against Hamas.
Correct.
But the issue is, the collateral of the Palestinian citizenry who don't have anywhere else to go has been darn near cataclysmic. Gaza, as we know it, has been reduced to rubble, at least part of the country. Yeah. It looks like post-World War II Europe. The cities are leveled.
Yeah. Which we knew was going to happen. The college campus protests are kind of, I don't know. Well, I do know. I think that you have colleges and universities who are looking to attract students.
Right.
And so they are really like bending over backwards to get these students to come to their universities. And then those kids have a lot of power in being there and dictating a lot of things. And I think that the power dynamic has shifted so much to the student population that the administration who actually makes the decisions has given them too much power in allowing them to run rampant with half-baked ideas of what they think that they're doing is correct. And, protesting things and being maybe aggressive in their thoughts and actions has no place on a college campus, and you're not really being beneficial to what you are asking. So they're asking universities to divest their financial investments in defense.
In the military-industrial complex.
Right, in a military-industrial complex. So instead of being proactive and thinking about it in a way that makes sense, meaning, hey, we would love for you to divest in this because this is not something that aligns with our generation of students that would like to come to your university. Did you think it would be possible over the next 5 to 10 years that you start to decrease those investments and increase those investments in other things that we maybe more would align with?
It's like socially conscious investing. It is not. This is not a novel concept.
No,
the last
it's
10
not.
years, we've really seen a push to about like, hey,
Yeah,
people are talking about what their companies or who they work for or investment groups. Like,
correct.
hey, if I'm saying to the guys doing my investments, like, listen, I want in things that are
Less fossil fuels and more renewable energy.
Yeah.
That's a baseline, right? So I feel like you could do that. The problem is that instead of being thoughtful in those things, which would help, then that's their biggest cry, right? We don't want you to support the military industrial complex. That's fine. That's great. I'm happy for that. And there are ways of doing that are more productive than what you're doing now. Yeah. And a lot of that comes with youth.
Yeah.
It's like youth is wasted on the young.
Yes.
Because you're sitting here and I'm looking at all these kids who are going to have college educations, but they're also active on social media and they're posting all of these things that they're doing. And then they're going to go out into the job market.
Right. They're posting about, as we said before, and my index of suspicion is raised. Right. And I become very concerned when I hear a 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old person using the term Zionist.
Yeah.
Okay? I just generally think nothing good's going to come out of your mouth when you say, as you said, essentially, usually you hear the term Zionist from extremists. And so it certainly raises my index of suspicion and what you're posting. Now, if you want to post on social media, like, look, I think you should free the Israeli hostages. I think, but I also think that Israel needs to become. We cannot let people starve in Gaza. Right. Okay, that's not going to upset me as an employer. I'd be like, hey, I understand that.
Yeah,
like,
it's a humanitarian thing.
Hey. I want, if I see a kid or a young person on this, who's, I'm raising money, specifically to go to aide for citizens of Gaza. It's not going to go to some
or World Central Kitchen,
right? Exactly, right. Someone like World Central,
Jose Andres,
Jose Andres, one of the great people of the world.
Yeah,
who they lost some people
they did,
during that. No, something like that, I'm here for. But yeah, when you're talking about
100%.
The Zionists and we need to, about supporting what's going on. People were chanting the name in a reverent way. I saw in New York of the leader of Hamas, at least the leader of Hamas in Gaza. I'm thinking, no, this guy's just a terrorist. That's like essentially to Americans. That would have sounded to me 20 some odd years ago if you were chanting about Sheikh bin Laden. No, he's a terrorist, and he was. And what he found out was, sic semper tyrannis, and that's what happens. Yeah. Or bin Laden found out, you live by the sword, you die by the sword, or he found out FAFO, however you want to put it. That's what I absolutely think should be happening to the leaders of Hamas.
Yeah, they should be prosecuted.
I think Israel should be prosecuting the war against them, against their leadership, and they should be targeting them with extreme prejudice.
I agree. Again,
and
a more
Israeli
productive.
has been able to do this, but they've shown this ability.
Golda Meir did it.
Ask the folks who thought Black September was a good idea. Golda Meir had, no, we're going to prosecute.
She had real chutzpah that one.
we're gonna prosecute these people.
Yes.
In an extrajudicial sort of way. They aren't getting trials. No, the only trial they're going to get is the barrel of a gun, and because that's what they wrought on themselves. If Israel, as we've said, there's been physicists in Iran that blow up occasionally in Tehran. You know why? Because Israel is able to target and say, that's the guy is the linchpin of their nuclear plan, and we can set him back 5 years. Okay?
Yeah.
But Israel has that capability, and I would much rather see, the targeted efforts to punish those who brought this destruction on Gaza rather than, prosecuting that war against folks that have nowhere, the regular rank. you can say, well, hey, it's their fault. They're the ones that they didn't really elect Hamas. Hamas is a dictatorship too.
And I will say this as loud as possible. The Palestinian people are the ones that are getting the short end of the stick on this entire deal. Palestinian people as a whole are wonderful. Yeah. And they have families and they're full of love. And I think that they have been totally the pawn in this entire Hamas extremist sensation, and the PLO hasn't been great, and the PLO's been
useless. They're not even prosecuting. They're not fighting. They're just doing nothing. They're just corrupt. Yeah. They have no leadership. Abbas is 90, and holding on to power.
Right.
But
I feel that for the Palestinian people who are dynamic and diverse people, they're not being represented well by the people that are coming in and taking over power. And like you and I said, they don't have a voice because they express their voice, they could lose their lives. Yes. And then it's a dictator fear-based system. So it's a non-win system. I agree that it needs to be removed from the Palestinian area, but that's difficult to do. Again, we don't have the answers. Right. No, we're not acting
we could talk
like
about this for
hours.
If we could just stay on it for days, weeks, there isn't,
there is no like golden ticket to get out of this. However, the youth of this country really needs to take a step back and look at the bigger picture and just not jump on a bandwagon.
Right. And what can you accomplish? Okay, you don't like Netanyahu. Well, most people don't like Bibi Netanyahu. Yeah. But that's not we don't get to vote in that election.
Right. So if you really are passionate about it, then you should go to Israel and start a grassroots effort to get rid of Bibi. Right. Like there are more positive and productive ways of handling yourself and moving the needle than protesting and saying things that are negative.
Right. And saying things
saying inappropriate things
about
you might regret
about
later.
The state of Israel and the Israeli people and their right to exist and their right to exist safely.
Yeah.
And 2 weeks ago, right, led by Hezbollah, and which is, as we know, is just a puppet of Iran. They shot 300 rockets, drones, whatever. They fired indiscriminately into Israel. They weren't targeting military targets. They're just trying to hit anything they can. American technology and might literally knocked down 99% of the things they shot in the air.
Right.
They launched 300 projectiles all at once, and the Israeli Iron Dome, which is American technology, knocked down 99% of these things. It was an amazing show of American technological might. And quite frankly, I think those things, when things like that happen, it has a chilling impact on our friends in Beijing and Moscow about the technology of the American military.
Right.
So look, these aren't good people, and the Israeli citizenry shouldn't be worried about somebody launching a suicide drone into Tel Aviv or into their sections of Jerusalem or Haifa or pick whatever city you want.
Tel Aviv, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
honestly, I feel like and you have these institutions like USC and Columbia. These are like pretty pretty prestigious, prestigious universities, and you're having these children take over your quads and camping and saying really hateful and hurtful things that are inappropriate and not being
and targeting Jewish American students.
Yeah.
Look, Columbia has been a very Jewish American heavy university in the last 40, 50 years, before they worked out some of their prejudices and some of the ways they used to do things. But no, it's it's in New York City, which has a huge, as we know, Jewish population. Yeah. It is where the, Jewish Americans have sent, one of those particular schools where Jewish Americans have sent their best and brightest.
Absolutely.
And Columbia is kind of the heart of
Columbia and Barnard.
Yeah. Where, where Jewish people have proudly sent the elite of the Jewish American youth have been sent there, and now they're feeling targeted. That's not okay.
That's not okay. I don't think anybody should feel targeted in a space for learning and where there should be a space for debate. I'm not saying that, but when it turns from debate into it's not a debate anymore. It's a hostile takeover. Right. That's a problem, and I think that the students that are a part of this, again, will live to mostly regret the decisions that they're making, especially when it comes to, being able to be hired in a job market. If you're in an elite institution, yes, you have a degree from Columbia,
right.
but you participated in this.
People are going to look on your social media, man.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing. It's sort of like they're very out there with it, and you and I are not saying that they don't have some valid points, but the points aren't being made in a way that are productive.
Right.
They're reductive, if anything. And I think that, if you want to make a positive change, then you need to go out and actually do it. Don't just sit on a college campus and make a sign and be a negative Nancy. You've got to get up and you've got to go and do something.
Right.
If you want to see change in the world, you have to go and do it. And, as Jews, you have to, there's a phrase, it's called tikkun olam. You're supposed to repair an imperfect world.
Mm-hmm.
So nobody says that the world is perfect,
right?
But if you do nothing to make a difference, then you are part of the problem,
right?
So if you're going to sit there and you want to make an effort and you want to see change in the world, you've got to go and do it. You can't just sit there and blame other people for the atrocities you think are happening to yourself or other people. You have to go and you have to say, look, how can we fix this?
Right.
Like, how can I be a positive factor? Yes, you're going to get knocked down. You're going to get denied. But if you let that be a factor, then you're never going to be the seed of change.
Yeah.
So if you're,
but do it the right way.
You have to do it in a respectful and the right way. You're never going to get anywhere by being the loudest and the most negative person in the room.
You can advocate for humanitarian need without making Jewish Americans be in fear of their safety.
Yeah.
There's again,
That's counterproductive.
Right. I can be.
You're doing the exact same thing, but you're accusing somebody of
pro-Jewish American, pro-Jewish, and the rights of Jews to safely worship and identify however they want, and still say like, hey, but we got to stop something. We can't let you can't have genocide either.
Right. And I think a lot of the majority of, I don't know, people of my generation don't agree with how this whole thing happened. There was a level of shock and horror when this whole thing started. And I think it just kind of got way out of hand really quickly. And, everybody was sort of just in the whole, still in the shock of it.
Yeah.
And then, you're like, okay, the person that is in charge, nobody likes, like not a lot of people like this guy. So I think the leadership is definitely an issue. But again, if that's your main cause and you want to make sure that the university that you're going to aligns with you, then you should have done the research before you applied to that university. Because if you knew that they had an industrial investing in industrial, that's on you.
Yes.
So you have the ability to say, I don't want to go to Columbia anymore because they don't align with my morals.
Right.
That's your decision. You are free to do that in this country, which is, thank goodness for that. But if you say, I love Columbia and I wish Columbia aligned more with my ideals and I can help move that needle, I'm going to go do that.
Agreed.
But again, you don't have to go, these public institutions do not have to accept you and they can kick you out.
Yes.
And I think that,
when somebody, one of the leaders of the Columbia protest says Zionists don't deserve to exist, you get thrown out of school.
You do.
And you know what? So yeah, words have consequences.
Yeah. I will say when we were in Cambridge, Mass, where Harvard is, that there was an active protest for fair and equal pay and health benefits for the cafeteria workers and maintenance for the university. And the student body took that on because Harvard has a huge endowment.
Right.
And there is no reason that these people can't afford, a lot of them were on Medicaid and stuff like that. There was no reason why they couldn't have good health insurance.
Right.
And so the student population took that on and they actually, helped negotiate that with the unions and everything else. And they helped move that needle forwards. That is a way.
Effectuating positive
that's
change.
Yeah. But they had protests. They had people on the streets for people to sign petitions. They had very concise documentation about what they were doing and why they were doing it. They were loud about it, but they were also productive.
And that's when, it's an example of that's where the phrase, power to the people.
Yeah.
That's the people.
Yeah. And you're seeing they were seeing a total lack of equity in pay for the people that were providing the basics for them. Right. And it's sort of like they were like, look, you feed me, you make sure my dorms are safe.
Right.
You deserve to have a living wage and health insurance. great. Yeah. Okay, great. That's how you do that. That's like a public policy situation. And that was, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. Right. But, you know, that was like, okay, great. Harvard wasn't happy about it, but they were like, well, you know, it's not the worst thing we could do. Right. Right. So yeah, I just think that watching this college protest, I'll be interested to see how the universities respond to this and how they maybe implement more policies and rules and regulations on how this moves forward. And maybe you cannot have unsanctioned gatherings on the quads and living.
But I think what you are absolutely going to see, though, is that your words, your social media posts,
you have consequences.
Are going to have consequences. And I think people that have promoted, it doesn't matter what side, hate, threatening, harassment, I think they're going to find out FAFO.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's going to happen to them.
It is. And I think,
and you know what? It's going to be a hard lesson to learn, but it's a lesson some of these guys, some of these young people got to learn is that words matter. There are consequences.
There's consequences for your actions. And I think a lot of them have had examples where people are not held responsible for, there are no consequences for their actions on a large or public scale. And I feel like, you know, my parents are very strict with me with consequences for my actions. Right. And I feel like I'm grateful for that. And I also had, you know, professors that were very much like that. Okay, no, you know, you have, and I think that there's a level of fear based, in this country as far as higher ed is concerned. And I think that you have to basically hold a firm line, and people will, not saying that they can't have their own ideas and they can't push. That's the whole point of debate, is to have an intellectual conversation and learn from each other and make decisions based on that. But we've lost that. Yes. We have lost that as a country.
Well, and you know, we've seen a person who was our former president, that, you know, is
dodging really consequences.
Right. Has said and done so many, you know, incendiary things. So, I mean, I think that's sort of I think that's, you know, where why kids that, you know,
well, the
I've
president,
seen
the
him
ex-president
see a former president do this over the last 10 years and, you know, yet to be really held accountable, and emboldens them. Whether they agree with him politically, correct, they just see, well, there's no consequences.
Right.
So.
And there are different rules apply for different people. Yeah. And I think that, you know, you have to be able to, again, see the bigger picture here. And then if you want to make change, you have to actually do the work. You can't just talk about it, and you can't just scream. You can't just be the loudest person in the room.
Exactly. So,
well, my goodness.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
We got deep.
We got deep. Yeah. Also, early voting is next week.
Yeah. So turnout, obviously very competitive. The two main elections, probably in the entire state of Maryland. Yeah. Maryland's 6th congressional to replace David Trone. Yep. And then David Trone and Atterbrooks are running for the U.S. Senate for the primary to likely run against Larry Hogan for the open seat that's being vacated by Ben Cardin. So they're kind of right here in Western Maryland, you know, have a couple votes of consequence. So it'd be interesting.
We have a massive vote of consequence because, you know, the whole point is to switch the House to turn, you know, to change the House over to Democratic, and we need to maintain the Democratic seats in Senate. Yeah. So
it's a couple big elections here.
Massive elections that you have a huge say in. Yes. So get out and vote. Don't be I think the last 2 primaries, I think we've at 30%.
Looking forward, will be the first time that my daughter is able to vote. Right. So she and I, we're going to go on election day.
Where's your polling?
Fort Hill.
Fort Hill.
GBR. Go Big Red.
West Side.
Yep. So West Side belongs to us.
Exactly.
So no.
Tim and I always vote together. It's a lot of fun. We love getting our stickers.
Oh no, I think it's, as you know, big voter. So, but turnout. So hey,
go vote.
So this is obviously episode 19,
season 4.
Season 4. So that certainly begs the question. Yes, there have been 3 previous seasons. There have been 18 previous episodes of You Don't Know Jack. Lydia, where can they find us?
Oh, we're everywhere: iTunes, Stitcher, Amazon, Google Play, Spotify, Audible,
love Audible,
iHeartRadio, Deezer, Player FM, Samsung, just to name a few.
And you can find us on Instagram.
Yes, we're at JackYDK Pod.
You can find us at Twitter at JackYDK. You can find us on Facebook.
You Don't Know Jack Podcast.
And then you can find both of us on Twitter or X.
It's going to give it to you.
Yeah.
At RTL Pod.
And I'm at JMGGMPG.
All right, thanks.
Thanks,
See you next week.
See you next time.